Hello everyone, and welcome to our final Support Coordinator webinar of 2025, proudly brought to you by Endeavour Foundation. I'm Vicky Gray, your host for today's session, and today we're going to dive into Holiday Ready, supporting participants and families through the festive season, with our guest presenter, Mary Ingerton from Support Coordination Academy. As we gather online with attendees joining us from across Australia, I'd like to acknowledge the significance of the lands we all call home. If you'd like to honour the traditional custodians of the lands you're logging in from, feel free to share their name in the chat. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gubbi Gubbi people, traditional custodians of the land on which I'm hosting from today. In the spirit of reconciliation, Endeavour Foundation acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend their respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Now, a quick note on housekeeping. Your microphones and cameras will stay off, but we'd love for you to join the discussion in the chat. If you have any questions for our presenters, pop them in the Q&A section and we'll answer them after the presentation. You'll also find a link to our privacy policy in the chat, so please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about that. As mentioned earlier, during this webinar, we'll delve into Holiday Ready, supporting participants and families through the festive season. Our presenter today is Mary Ingerton from Support Coordination Academy. But before handing you over to Mary, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Shania Brennan. Shania is Endeavour Foundation's Operations Manager for Client Support, leading a team of social workers and disability specialists who advocate for our clients. With qualifications in psychology, HR management and social work, plus 8 years in the community sector, she's passionate about empowering vulnerable people with choice and control. Over to you, Shania.
Hello everyone. I'm hoping that you can hear me. I have been having some tech issues today, so I do apologise.
You're all good, Shania. We can hear you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you. Much appreciated, everyone. Okay, so hi. As Vicky mentioned, my name is Shania. It's wonderful to be here with you all again today for the last webinar of this year. Can't believe we're here saying that. Crazy. I guess, as you know, today we're talking a little bit about preparing for the festive season and for participants and making sure they're all kind of well supported and well established going into this Christmas period. So what I wanted to talk to you about really briefly before Mary takes us through the rest of today's session is just a little bit about how we as Endeavour Foundation prepare for the Christmas period to make sure that the people we support are fully set up and have everything that they need going into this period as well. So I thought I would focus on a couple of different areas. So looking at what the individual support needs are. So I guess some of those conversations that we're already having now is, what are the services that our people are currently engaged with? Are there any closures coming up? Are there going to be any impacts to the services that they are receiving, not only from Endeavour Foundation, but across all of their service providers? And are those changes going to impact their day-to-day support needs? Is there anything that we can do to jump in and, make sure that they have the support they need through this period as well? Looking at, the individual and their views and wishes as well, not only around the preference of what supports they would like going into this season, but also what their plans are for the festive period. For any of our people who are engaged and have relationships with their families, extended families, friends, anybody, what are their plans for the Christmas period? And, how can we make sure that they're supported to do what they want to do and enjoy all of the things that this period has to offer for everyone, while also knowing, we've got some people who may not be engaged with family and they may be home for this period. So what can we do to make sure that we also make this a very special time for them as well? One of the other domains, I guess, is stakeholders, and that includes family for our participants who have family and friends involved in their life. So I guess, linking in with what the individual support needs are as well. What stakeholders are off? Sometimes we've got allied health professionals or people who are taking time off over the Christmas period. Is there going to be an impact to the supports that they would maybe be receiving in home, that we need to plan for as a wider stakeholders group with the participant involved as well. And finally, funding. I think funding, it will have obviously quite a large undercurrent in all of these conversations. What are they currently funded for? Are we looking at additional supports? And, is there going to be any potential impacts to their funding down the track within their current plan periods, working with the funding periods as well, and all of those things. So those are just a few things that I guess we as Endeavour Foundation consider and converse about with stakeholders and the people that we support coming into this period, to make sure that it is a period of celebration and love and commitment, and it's a wonderful time, I guess, for everybody, and it's reflective of what they really want to experience within this period. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to Mary, who is going to take us through the rest of today's discussion. Thank you, Mary.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much, Shania. Always a pleasure. It's so good to see how well Endeavour really think about that person-centred planning, but also are really proactive in what they do. I really commend that. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about, again, supporting participants and families through the festive season. So my focus is really around support coordination. So my specialisation is in anything to do with support coordination, basically, live and breathe. So let's get started. Okay, holiday ready. So this is what we're going to have a look at today. And I'll just excuse myself. I have a bit of a sore throat, so I'm going to be drinking quite a bit of water. So we're going to be looking at understanding how to plan proactively for service interruptions and contingencies, learning approaches to support carers and families experiencing festive season stress, exploring ways to reduce plan fatigue and maintain a funding balance, and identifying practical strategies for fostering inclusion and connection during the holidays, which is really, really important. So something just to note, and I always say this, when I talk about a participant, I'm talking about a participant as a general term. I'm also referring to their extended support networks. That could be family, friends, nominees, whatever that might be. So I just want to make that clear. Okay, so let's get started. Planning for service gaps. So many providers and community services, as Shania has just really talked about, close or reduce their hours over the Christmas period and often don't return to work until mid-January. I know probably a couple of years ago, we would really slow down about, end of November. December would be really quiet, January would be really quiet, and then February would start to kick in again. I'm actually finding it's really busy right up until Christmas now, and then January's really quiet. So I think it's really taking into consideration of planning ahead, because as support coordinators, we get really, really busy about doing the everyday things, following up, coordinating, linking, all those, communicating with our clients. But it's also about thinking about what's coming up. So putting our heads up out and just looking forward and going, okay, so we've only got, I don't know, where are we up to, the 18th, 5-6 weeks until Christmas, which has just gone way too fast. So it's really just thinking about what's coming up, how many participants do we have, who are really vulnerable and who are not so vulnerable, but also really thinking about what are their plans and what does that look like. Okay. The thing that I actually find is that often participants may face sudden changes in their supports availability. This can lead to anxiety, gaps in personal care, or an increase in risks to accessing supports or not being able to access supports. So it's really about that forward planning. As support coordinators, We need to anticipate closures early by contacting service providers to confirm holiday hours, to prepare participants for possible changes to their daily support needs. This may include coordinating with mainstream services like health or mental health, child protection, justice, adult guardians, GP clinics, whatever might be relevant for the person that you are supporting. And it's about trying to confirm what the continuity of service might be. So when are they leaving? When are they coming back? What would that look like? It's also about being clear about your own availability. So what are your plans? What are your intentions over that Christmas period? Or when are you going to start taking holidays? Or are you working over that period and you're available? Also supporting participants to develop clear contingency plans. And it's about creating that or asking that, well, what if situation? So what if your regular support worker is away during this time? Or what other supports could you access if your support worker is away? What would that look like for you? So it's kind of creating that what if and having a really good conversation around that. Also supporting a participant to document this information and rearrange their schedules of support if required. Ensuring things like emergency contacts, if their need to, if a crisis happens, who they can contact, any backup supports that might be known or might be accessible. And encouraging participants to develop a single, even something like a holiday ready schedule. And it's something that I've done before, and it's just like a one-piece pager that they can put on their fridge or whatever that might be, to include things like medication pickup dates might change, therapy closure dates, backup contact services. And it's really just a reminder. It's a really easy thing to do, especially if it's like putting all your planning into a one-page document that everyone is really clear about what's happening over that period. And encouraging independence where appropriate. So supporting people to plan ahead and arrange transport, and really supporting a participant to think about what's coming up, but also to build that capacity for them to have that conversation and that problem solving. So I'm going to give you a bit of an example. So one of the participants that I was working with regularly relied on community access to manage their anxiety. And then last year, their provider closed for about 3 weeks over the Christmas period. So we developed a plan, including a backup support worker through an alternative provider, which also included daily phone check-ins and scheduled activities with family members. So the preparation actually avoided a crisis and helped them to feel secure and prepared for the time that their regular support worker would be away. So we actually had to work that and plan that earlier to be able to introduce a new person, make sure that they understood their schedule, that other person, the participant, was really comfortable with them. And then we were able to put those plans in place. And then we had a really clear schedule about when their next support worker or the original support worker would come back in. And it's just a bit of an example. Okay. I'm not coughing yet, so that's a good thing. Okay. Supporting carers. I think this is one of the most important things. I have a couple of roles, and one of them is a social worker at Mara Hospital, and I work with a lot of families who have adult participants, and they may be quite elderly, or they really don't understand what's going on, or they might be quite fatigued by the time it comes to Christmas. So really thinking about the participant themselves, but who in that support network will also need some support around, especially direct carers. So carers often experience pressure over the festive period. So it's balancing those carer responsibilities, family expectations, and sometimes social isolation. So sometimes carers experience what we call invisible fatigue. So it often relates to like an emotional burnout that isn't immediately visible. So quite often when people have like a physical burnout or they're physically drained, you can often see it. But when it's emotional or psychological, sometimes it's like a hidden or a visible fatigue. So as a support coordinator, it's really having these discussions with carers as well to try and recognise some signs of possible carer burnout. And it might be things like withdrawal of services or irritability, declining engagement in planning meetings. It could be just statements like, I just want this year to be over with. I'm done. I've had enough. So these kind of things might signal like a deeper exhaustion. So really spending time with carers and that support network to make sure that we have that, that circle of supports around the person. To understand a carer's resilience and capacity to care for their person over this period, it's helpful to ask open questions like, how are you coping as we head into the holidays? Or what would make this time easier for you? What are some of the plans that you have? Have you thought about how you're going, like if the support work is not available, have you thought about what that's going to look like? Sometimes I've actually found that just the act of listening and discussing and raising this, having these conversations, provides some relief because it actually helps the person stop and think about and focus on, okay, this is coming up, what do we need to do? It's also helpful to link in like respite and other support options available. So this could include like short-term respite opportunities through the use of NDIS funding, connecting with Carer Gateway. Often they might have options available, could be local council programs or even peer support groups. Encouraging carers to take micro breaks if they need them, because that could even be like a half a day reset to reset their mental energy. So thinking about really thinking outside the box, what could that look like? As well, when you're working with carers, really promoting that self-care and boundary setting, and supporting a carer to discuss some realistic expectations. So it's okay not to attend every event or provide care alone. Encouraging that self-kindness and social connection. Okay, I'll give you another example. Okay, so a carer I was working with, I supported them, like they were really dreading Christmas coming because they had quite a large family and all the large family were coming to their area, not to their house specifically, but to their area. But very, very large families, often there's some family tension, which is often happens at Christmas anyway. But they were already feeling quite exhausted. So we talked about what would really help you to regain some of that energy, have some resilience, have a different focus, spend some time for you. So we arranged some short-term respite, and it was only for like 3 days from the participants' core funding. And during that time when the participant was having that respite, we linked the carers in with it was like a carer support lunch. And so it was a lunchtime event where they could go along with other carers. And they found that really, really helpful just to talk to other people and understand that it wasn't just them that was feeling like this. And they actually came back feeling a lot more refreshed and more confident, especially in relation to using respite again, because I'd never actually done that before. So that was actually a first for them as well. But it really just highlights thinking quite outside the box. What are some of the things that we can try? Okay. Managing plan fatigue. A bit of a funny thing. By the end of the year, participants and families often feel a bit overwhelmed by the admin tasks. So it's like, especially if they're self-managing, they're doing the invoicing, they're claiming, they've got to go often through review processes, or they might be scheduling supports and are already starting to become overwhelmed about what changes are going to happen over this period. And again, that emotional exhaustion from constantly advocating for their person. I know as a parent myself, by the end of the year, I'm absolutely done. So it's when you've got those added layers as well, it can become quite overwhelming. So a support coordinator can actually support a participant and their family to manage any fatigue they might be feeling by going through their funding as well. So reviewing their funding by having an early check-in. Often I do it around late November. And it helps to really just have a regular check-in, and it might not be a check-in that I actually was going to go and review the funding, but we do. And then what we do is that we actually look at their funding and what's remaining, and are there any underspends that could be used for like meeting outcomes or supports over this period, or is there a need to adjust some supports temporarily due to provider closures? So really starting to do that from a funding perspective, but also a carer and a participant perspective. So helping participants to pause or consolidate supports rather than adding any additional complexity. So how can we just kind of reduce any complexity, reduce any exhaustion, and just go, what are some of the things that we can do? And it might be just short term over that 3 to 4 week period, or whatever that might be. Reminding participants that the core funding can be used flexibly to meet their changing needs, and planning for re-engagement. So that's about, well, we're planning for what's going to happen over that period, but when are we all going to come back and re-engage? So setting dates to reconnect after the holidays to review that wellbeing, but also that plan usage. And that's also that reconnection is also what I was talking about previously, like a one-pager to go, this is when your therapy supports will kick back in, this is when this will happen, this is when this will happen. So it kind of gives like a really good schedule. Okay, I'll give you another example. Okay. Okay, so for one of the participants that I've been supporting, it was a single parent supporting two teenage children with disabilities. And obviously by December, they were just felt completely burnt out. So they were just tired of managing the invoices, the budgets, coordinating supports, advocating, and they were just exhausted from the constant coordinating, chasing up providers, and generally problem-solving issues. So during our check-in review, I've noticed that they hadn't taken any real breaks or used their core supports for household help, even though that the funding allowed for it. So together we came up with a plan to reprioritise some of those supports over that period to try and reduce some of the pressure on the family. So we reduced some of the therapy sessions that could wait until the new year and reallocated that time and energy towards some in-home assistance and self-care. So sometimes about managing that plan fatigue isn't about doing more, it's about rearranging some of the supports and really understanding from the family, the carers, the network, the person themselves, what's really important to them. And it's about helping them sometimes do less for a short amount of time and giving them permission to do that without feeling guilty. Okay, how are we going? Are we going really well for time? Plenty of time. Throat is really sore. Gonna pour water. Okay, let's keep going. Social inclusion and wellbeing. This is my favourite. So social inclusion and wellbeing, the holiday season can amplify loneliness and social isolation, particularly for participants if they live alone by themselves, or they might be in supported accommodation. It might be someone who has a lot of family, but the family aren't going to be around, or it could be someone without a lot of informal or any informal networks. Or the person might have recently moved into a new community and doesn't have a lot of family connection or community connection because they've just moved. So it's really thinking about from this perspective of social inclusion and wellbeing. So as support coordinators, we can really encourage that community engagement. So when we're thinking outside the box or talking to people about what if situations, what if this, what about this, when your support worker be available, what therapy services are closing, or how all that's going to work. Really thinking about events that might be available within the community. I'm based in Brisbane, and I know over the Christmas period, there's lots and lots of events that are happening. So it's about maybe doing some research as well and sharing some local inclusive events. So it could be things like community lunches, there could be like concerts or craft groups, volunteering opportunities. It's really about encouraging participation based on a person's interests, but also it's around accessibility as well. Also, another thing that I've actually found, especially if around, sometimes I've worked with participants and Christmas time is a real hard time for them, and it brings up a lot of bad memories, especially when there's been trauma. So it's about having more regular check-ins from people that they know and trust. So it could be their support workers, or it could be service providers. And sometimes just picking up the phone, having that phone call, not necessarily having to go out and provide support, but more that check-in to say, hey, how you going? Do you want to have a conversation? And one of the big things for me too is celebrating diversity. So acknowledging that not all people celebrate Christmas, and it's about supporting inclusive and respectful conversation. So it's really just having that discussion about what does this period mean to you, and really understanding it from that person's perspective. What does that look like within your own culture, you know? And it's I find it really interesting to really learn what happens over this period with different cultures. I've lived a lot overseas in Asia, and it's completely different to what happens here in Australia. I'll give you another example. There was a participant that I was working with that felt very isolated over Christmas. He was living in a SDA apartment with SIL support, had no informal supports, and was quite distanced from any relatives that he actually had any connection with. And he hadn't been living in the apartment for very long, so didn't really know his community that well. So one thing that we actually looked at was really looking at, well, what are your interests and what are the things that you like to do? And he really liked working with his hands, really had previously had some experience in working with woodwork and that type of thing. So we actually looked up our local men's shed, which was a local council program, and we linked him into the men's shed and had organised for a support worker to go with him. And we kind of set that up prior to the Christmas period so that he was comfortable doing it over that period, because they were actually open during that period. And then what we found that in the new year, when we came back to reconnect, that he'd actually made some new friends and he was actually taking on some regular activities. And what we actually found was that the social connection became the best protective factor for his mental health. And it was something that we could actually then expand on a bit further. Okay, just giving you some ideas. Okay, how are we going? Really good. Key takeaways. Planning early to reduce anxiety. So being proactive, planning ahead, being proactive. Start your planning now. And it's really about managing those service gaps. So confirming provider closures, availability, and backup options early to reduce anxiety and risk for any specific participants. Supporting participants to create simple contingency plans and a holiday ready schedule with key contacts, medication dates, backup supports, and also reconnection dates are really, really helpful. And again, clarifying your own availability and encouraging independence building wherever appropriate. To support and strengthen carers. Noticing early signs of carer stress or burnout and creating space for open, supportive conversations. It's really, really important. Linking carers with respite, carer gateway, community programs to reduce some of the pressures around the festive season and encouraging healthy boundaries, taking micro breaks, and having realistic expectations about what can be achieved, what is achievable. Addressing some of that plan fatigue, so conducting early budget check-ins to manage underspend or overspend and adjusting those supports over the holiday periods, simplifying or consolidating supports to reduce any feelings of being overwhelmed, and highlighting that flexibility around the core budget, helping participants and family to prioritise rest by reducing some of that administrative load. Okay. And then encouraging that inclusion to support wellbeing and connection. And that's really thinking about how can we ensure that this person feels included over this period? Are we able to link in some community supports, but also understanding what this festive season means to them? Okay, I'm pretty much done. We can go to some Q&A. Okay, just going to open this up. Here we go. I'm just waiting for my Q&A to open up. Not working. I'll do it again. Okay, now it's linking. Here we go. Okay, so how important is it for support coordinators to look after themselves during this period? Any tips? I think it's really, really important, especially if you're working with participants who have really high complexity, might be high risk, or some increasing risk that's going on. Really making sure that you do that forward planning and you put supports and services in place, that that the person is understanding of what's happening over that period, is really understanding your availability or non-availability, so that you're not getting, so that you don't have to be watching your phone, not that you should be watching your phone or anything like that as well, but it's about doing that forward planning so you're actually taking care of your own self and well-being as well, so that you're not stressed over that period. You're not worrying about people. You're not feeling that you have to go and check your computer or ring someone or do whatever. So if you're committing to take time off over that period, making sure that you do that planning so that you can actually have a rest yourself and have some downtime. I think it's really, really important over that period. Okay, here we go. Let's scroll up. Are registered support coordination officers allowed to close down for 2 weeks over the Christmas and New Year holiday period? Are there any NDIS policies that prohibit this? No, not to my knowledge. I think it's common knowledge that my understanding is that the NDIA officers close down over that period. You'd need to check that. There's nothing around, my understanding is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is there's nothing around NDIS policies or guidelines or Quality and Safeguard Commission around registered providers needing to be open. It's about contingency planning, making sure, so as part of the code of conduct, but also your requirement around registered providers, you're required to do contingency planning. It's part of your code of ethics. So it's about saying, okay, so we're going to be closing down over this period. You need to notify participants that you're not going to be available. You need to do that forward planning around what are the contingency plans over that period to ensure that that person has the right information, that appropriate supports are linked in, but also that they know who to contact in case of an emergency, all that kind of stuff. So for me, around the code of ethics and requirements around registered providers, that's what your requirement is. Okay. Wendy asks, seeking advice and clarification in relation to NDIS participant going on holidays and disability support workers. With the new NDIS changes, I understand disability support workers are not funded by NDIS plans for participants wishing to go on holiday again on cruise ships, say for 9 days. The cruise ship offers disability support workers while participant is on holiday. We ship this before. Participants have no family carers to assist them as guardians live in Queensland. This is despite being one of their chosen NDIS goals, go on holiday. Okay. A participant, it's a really good question, Wendy, and I would probably need to go and do more research into it. But my understanding is that if a participant is going on a holiday, whether it's on a cruise ship, whether it's interstate, whether it's on an aeroplane or whatever it is, the NDIS won't pay for the holiday. So they won't pay for the person's room on a cruise ship, because everybody would love to go on holiday. Some of us can afford it and some of us can't. How the NDIS supports work, it always has to be in relation to their disability-related supports. So if a person with a disability wants to go on holiday and they don't have any informal supports that can support them to go on holiday, to care for them while they're on holiday, and they need someone to go with them to be safe, because there's a risk around their safety if they don't, then my understanding is support workers can be used to go with them on that holiday. There would need to be some clarification around what that looks like. What is the cruise ship actually offering? Are they actually offering that recognizing that this person has a dependent or needs a dependent with them? And then, so what does that actually look like? I'm wondering whether you're actually referring to short-term accommodation that's now called respite. If that's what you're talking about, there's very clear guidelines around that, around what the funding can be used for and when it can be used. But in relation to a person going away, if they need support and it's directly related to the impact of their functional impairment, then they don't have informal support networks. So it's basically providing the justification around why they need that support and why they need to access that funding to do it. Hopefully that makes sense. Please put more comments in there if I'm completely on the wrong track. Okay, do we have any more questions? No, we only have a small group today. Here we go. There's another one. I think this question is coming into the chat, but they're not being brought over to the Q&A. Okay. Within your own state. NDIS participants pay for the cruise ship holiday. Okay, so I'm talking, I was looking at the Q&A and there's stuff coming into the chat. So I've just gone over to the chat. Okay, yes, NDIS participants pay for the cruise ship holiday. There you go. Coral, my understanding is that participants can take a holiday as short-term respite within your own state. Interesting. I don't know, actually. I don't know that there are restrictions around the own state. I'd need to go and do some research around that. Most of the times when I've organised short-term accommodation or short-term respite, what it's called now, it's been local anyway. So I haven't really thought about whether it's going to be interstate. So that's something, basically going and having a look at the NDIS pricing arrangements and price limits. Pardon me, to see what the conditions are in relation to respite. Does it clearly say you can't go interstate? I don't know. Can participants' SDA plan be used to pay a disability cabin at Resort Park? No. Specialist disability accommodation is specific funding for bricks and mortar where the person lives. It can't be used to go and provide other accommodation options. No, that's not what SDA is. Recently it has to be in your own state. Okay, thank you for Denise. I'm going to go and have a look at that because I haven't seen that before. It's great that you're bringing this up. Okay. Do you have any tips? Where are we at? Do you have any tips for trying to organise respite for someone who doesn't fit the mould or who qualifies to have funding included in their plan? Participant lives alone but has severe DID and needs respite, feeling of safety with cameras and protection of being in a hotel room rather than their own home. There are parts who are safe and others who aren't. Christmas is very tough for the person. Yeah. Okay, needs respite. Is it because they're not feeling safe within their own home? I'd need a bit more information. Happy, Anika, for you to email me at info@SC Academy. I think I need a bit more context. Basically, when you're looking at respite, it's really from a support coordination perspective. It's about providing evidence about why it's required and why it should be justified. So it's really about, why does the person need respite? What is that going to look like? What is the functional impact of their impairment, and how does that create barriers for that person? And how will the respite support that person to achieve their goals or outcomes, or what outcomes are going to be achieved by providing that respite? Very difficult to justify respite when a person is living alone. And it's really interesting that they've changed it from short-term accommodation to short-term respite, because it used to be called respite prior to the NDIS. It did in Queensland anyway. When a person is living alone, I've worked with a number of people who are living alone, and the way that we have looked at it is it's about broadening that person's opportunities and ability to increase their skills, confidence in a different environment. So it's about looking at it from a capacity building focus. And so I used to work with a gentleman who had an acquired brain injury, and he was in Brisbane, and he used to like to go to the Sunshine Coast. Couldn't go to the Sunshine Coast without support, so he always had to take a support worker with him. But when he went to the Sunshine Coast, he went to the same place, built those relationships and those connections, and he actually got to experience, got more confident, he got better at talking, he got better at socializing. And I suppose it's about really thinking about how can that respite support that person to build that capacity outside the environment that they're already in. Hopefully that's a helpful example. Okay, can we get a copy of the PowerPoint, please? Yes, Endeavour will send out copies of the PowerPoints as well. Okay. From Plan Tracker's recent article, what is not included in short-term respite? Following items in travel are not considered. Okay. Visiting family and friends. That's really interesting. I would go back to Plan Trackers and I'd ask them to clarify where they've got the information from, so that you can clearly reference it back to where they've got it. Is it somewhere? Is it something that they are just making assumptions about, or is it from advice directly from the NDIS? And if it is directly advice from the NDIS, I would be asking them to reference it and clearly clarify where they've got that information from, because that's really interesting. Wow, interesting. Okay. Okay. Just looking at some of the comments. Managed to get respite for a participant because it was a group trip and worked for her goals of meeting new people and gaining confidence in the community. Great. Fantastic. My email address is info@scacademy.com.au. It's on the slide there. Good idea to go back and seek their references. Great. Thanks so much for your insightful webinar. Okay, I think that's about it. Someone's got their hand up. Can you put a question into the comment? That'd be really great. Okay. Okay, Vicky, I think we are. I think
we've exhausted all our questions today, haven't we?
Yeah.
We'll just see if we've got that one more hand up. I'll just see if that. Just give that a second, just in case she or he. Sorry, you can't see the name. Is having just a typing moment to pop in that question, but if not, we'll. Sorry, it was a mistake. All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kazoo. Right, not a problem.
Okay.
Okay.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Mary, for another great session. I'm sure that sparked plenty of ideas for you all to support your clients over this very busy festive season. As Mary said, next week you'll get an email with all the recording of today's session and the PDF of the presentation. Plus, we'll share an additional resource with the questions that Mary's answered today. We'll pop that into an article, so you can refer back to that if you need to. Finally, we're also currently planning next year's webinar topics, and we would love your input. So if you can please keep an eye out for the email over the next 2 weeks, inviting you to complete our end of year survey. It's the perfect chance for you to have your say about which topics you would like to learn more about in 2026. And before we go, we just shared a link to our webinar recordings on YouTube, so you can catch up with any of our previous sessions over the last couple of years. We've got quite a gallery there now, so please hop on in and just check out what we have from Mary's brilliant mind for you guys to read over and listen to. We've also dropped a link to our Care Connect monthly newsletter in the chat, and that's also full of resources and handy information for support coordinators. On behalf of Endeavour Foundation, I'd like to thank you all for attending today's webinar and for being part of all of our sessions throughout the year. I wish you all a wonderful afternoon, a very safe Christmas, and we very much look forward to seeing you all again in 2026. Thanks again. Goodbye.